She walked into the bank confident, carrying a stack of bills worth millions, only to have them thrown on the floor by a teller who didn't see her worth. By sunrise, the $2 billion deal she had worked a year for had vanished. But what she did next would change the rules of the game forever. Ava Morgan, the CEO of a fast-growing tech empire, entered the downtown bank early in the morning, her designer suit perfectly tailored, her briefcase heavy with bundles of bills earmarked. For a critical international partnership, a deal worth over $2 billion that could take her company to new heights. She stood patiently in line, surrounded by ordinary customers, the sounds of printers, footsteps, and faint murmurs filling the air, and she noticed the subtle glances thrown her way, some curious, some dismissive, as though people could sense she didn't belong in this ordinary place carrying extraordinary wealth. When her turn came, she approached the teller, a young white woman named Karen, who barely looked up, tapping on her keyboard as though the very presence of Ava was an interruption, and Ava smiled politely, placing her briefcase on the counter, and explaining that she needed to deposit a large sum for a time-sensitive transfer. But before she could finish, Karen scoffed audibly, glancing at the stacks of cash as if questioning their legitimacy, and in one sudden motion, she shoved the bundles onto the floor with a sharp clatter, scattering hundreds of thousands of dollars across the tiles. The room went silent. Other customers froze, some staring in disbelief, others whispering behind hands, and Ava felt a surge of shock followed immediately by a controlled fury. Realizing that this wasn't just carelessness, it was a deliberate act of disrespect based on assumptions about her appearance, her race, and perhaps even her gender. She bent gracefully to collect the bills, her hands steady despite the heat rising in her chest, while the teller avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy, and Ava's mind raced as she calculated the potential fallout. Every minute mattered. For tomorrow's meeting, where the international partners would expect proof of liquidity and credibility, and a single misstep today could cost them everything. Ava left the bank quietly, refusing to escalate the scene in public, knowing that she needed strategy, not anger, to handle the injustice. As she stepped into the cool morning air, she pulled out her phone and called her COO, instructing her team to gather every legal, financial, and PR tool available. Because by sunrise, the world would need to understand that disrespecting her wasn't just an insult, it was a risk to billions of dollars in business. She drove to her office in silence, her mind replaying the incident in exact detail, envisioning how she could turn this humiliation into leverage, how she could expose systemic bias without appearing vindictive, how she could make sure that, by morning, the narrative wasn't hers to defend, it would be hers to control. She imagined the press coverage, the viral videos, the social media outrage, and she smiled subtly, knowing that the same video that humiliated her would also validate her power, that a single act of injustice could become the spark that lit an unstoppable fire, and as she entered her office and locked the door, she drafted emails to her legal team, her PR team, and her investors, each message precise and deliberate, setting the wheels in motion for a storm that would be felt across the financial world, all while maintaining the calm, authoritative demeanor that defined her not just as a CEO, but as a woman who would never allow anyone's ignorance to dictate her success. That night, Ava stayed in the office long after the lights in the city dimmed, reviewing every possible outcome, analyzing every response from the bank, and preparing for the potential backlash that could jeopardize the $2 billion partnership, all while monitoring the social media platforms that had begun buzzing with early whispers of what had happened at the downtown branch. And she realized that by tomorrow, the incident could either ruin the deal or amplify her authority depending on how she handled it. She scheduled a meeting with her legal counsel via video call, walking them through the bank's internal policies, the federal anti-discrimination laws, and the potential for both public exposure and financial liability, all the while instructing her PR director to craft a statement that was firm, dignified, and unmistakably clear. The disrespect shown to her was unacceptable, and any entity partnering with her company would need to understand that integrity and accountability were non-negotiable. As midnight approached, Ava began contacting the executives from the international conglomerate, sending concise messages accompanied by images of the incident captured by onlookers, emphasizing that she had maintained professionalism despite provocation, and subtly signaling that her ability to turn obstacles into decisive outcomes was exactly why they should trust her leadership and her company's stability. By the early morning hours, the story had started trending online, with hashtags highlighting racial injustice and corporate accountability, and Ava, still seated at her sleek white desk, reviewed analytics showing engagement from major business, networks, journalists, and influencers, recognizing that every share, every comment, every forwarded clip was creating pressure on both the bank and her potential partners to act correctly. She had spent years cultivating trust, negotiating, and presenting her company as a formidable yet ethical player in the global market. And now, within a single viral moment, the power dynamics had shifted. Her humiliation had turned into leverage, her moment of weakness into strategic advantage, and as dawn crept through the office windows, painting the room in warm gold, Ava composed herself, straightened her posture, and prepared for the meeting that would determine not only the future of the partnership but also the statement her company would make about respect, authority, and the consequences of underestimating someone who refused to be diminished. When she finally entered the conference room where the executives were waiting, their faces reflected curiosity and a cautious admiration, the video of the bank incident playing discreetly on a tablet, and Ava delivered her presentation with clarity and confidence, her tone unwavering, her words deliberate, emphasizing vision, strategy, and moral leadership. And when she concluded, one executive leaned forward and said, "We've seen leadership before, but not like this. We respect that you hold others accountable. Your company deserves our commitment." And with that acknowledgement, the verbal agreement was secured, leaving Ava poised not only to close the $2 billion deal, but also to set a precedent for how professionalism, dignity, and moral courage could command respect even in the harshest circumstances. With the deal tentatively secured, Ava turned her attention to the bank, knowing that allowing the incident to fade unaddressed would undermine the very principles she stood for. So she drafted a formal complaint to the corporate headquarters, detailing every action taken by the teller, the witness accounts, and the potential implications of their behavior on large-scale financial partnerships. She instructed her legal team to simultaneously prepare documentation for potential civil action, emphasizing that the bank's negligence and the employee's prejudice not only humiliated her, but posed a risk to significant corporate operations. While her PR department readied a statement to be released to the press, framing the story not merely as personal injustice, but as an urgent corporate accountability issue. Within hours, major news outlets had picked up the narrative, interviews were scheduled, and social media exploded with discussions, support from industry leaders, and widespread outrage over the teller's actions, turning the story into a national conversation on race, gender, and power in corporate spaces. The bank's management scrambled to respond, issuing an apology and claiming they would conduct internal reviews and sensitivity training. But by now, the momentum had shifted entirely to Ava, who remained poised, her message clear. Respect is non-negotiable, and the missteps of a single employee cannot diminish the value or credibility of a determined leader. Throughout the day, she coordinated with her team, ensuring that every article, every social media post, and every interview highlighted not only the injustice she faced, but also her company's accomplishments, the innovative projects underway, and the steadfast integrity guiding her leadership, creating a narrative where the public, investors, and partners saw that Ava Morgan not only survived humiliation, but converted it into proof of competence, resilience, and authority. By evening, the bank faced mounting scrutiny from regulators, customers, and the media, with calls for disciplinary action, public apologies, and even executive resignations, while Ava, after reviewing every development, sat back in her office, and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, recognizing that through strategy, composure, and relentless focus, she had transformed a personal attack into an unprecedented display of power and accountability, one that would be cited in business, schools, boardrooms, and leadership seminars as a masterclass in turning adversity into triumph. The morning after the viral incident, Ava entered the final negotiation for the $2 billion partnership with a sense of calm authority, aware that the events of the previous day had fundamentally altered the power dynamics. And as she presented her company's projections, plans, and vision, she noticed the executive's subtle deference, the quiet respect earned not through fear, but through steadfast integrity and relentless preparation. By the conclusion of the meeting, the board unanimously approved the deal, formalizing commitments and contracts that solidified Ava's company as a global leader, and she signed the documents with a serene sense of victory, not because she had humiliated anyone, but because she had demonstrated decisively that competence, respect, and moral courage commanded outcomes that money alone could not. Meanwhile, the bank, reeling from the public exposure, issued a full apology, placed the teller on administrative leave, and committed to systemic changes to prevent similar incidents. Yet the narrative had already shifted. Ava's decisive response had not only protected the partnership, but had elevated her reputation, inspiring countless professionals and leaders, particularly women and people of color, to stand firm in the face of discrimination. In the weeks and months that followed, media outlets featured her story extensively, highlighting how a single act of injustice had become the catalyst for a powerful display of leadership, strategy, and resilience. And Ava used the attention to launch initiatives promoting equality, mentorship, and empowerment within the corporate world, proving that true leadership is measured not only by wealth but by courage, character, and the ability to turn challenges into opportunities, ultimately leaving an indelible mark on both her company and the industry at large. Don't let this story stay just a video. Share it, talk about it, and stand up the next time you see disrespect or injustice. Respect isn't optional. It's a right. Every voice matters and every action counts. Be the change. Speak up. Support those who refuse to be silenced.